Have you ever met someone who just seems to have this magnetic presence, who walks into a room and, without saying a word, instantly commands respect and admiration? They're not trying to be the center of attention. They're not flashing a fake smile or forcing charisma, and yet people are drawn to them like gravity. What's their secret? It's not some mysterious charm or an accident of personality. It's something far more powerful, something that's been tested and proven for over 2,000 years. It's Stoicism. Think about the last time you felt truly captivated by someone. Maybe it was their quiet confidence, the way they carried themselves with effortless grace. Or perhaps it was their ability to listen deeply, to make you feel understood without them saying much at all. These aren't random traits, they're the hallmarks of Stoic wisdom in action. The ancient Stoics knew something we often forget. True attraction isn't about performance. It's not about manipulating impressions or pretending to be someone you're not. It's about embodying principles so deeply that they radiate from you without effort. That's what we're diving into today, the 25 Stoic actions that create this kind of natural, irresistible pull. These aren't tricks or shortcuts, they're timeless practices that shape the way you think, move, and engage with the world. Imagine walking into any room knowing you don't have to try to be interesting or likable. Imagine people seeing you as someone grounded, authentic, and undeniably compelling, not because you're putting on a show, but because you've cultivated a way of being that simply draws them in. That's what the Stoics mastered, and that's what you're about to discover. So let's begin, not by chasing attraction, but by uncovering the quiet power of Stoicism that makes it effortless. The first and most foundational Stoic action is this: practice authenticity. Not the performative, social media brand of authenticity where people craft an image of being real, but the kind that runs bone deep. The quiet certainty of knowing who you are and refusing to bend to external expectations. The Stoics weren't interested in masks or personas. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, "You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you." That's the heart of it. Authenticity isn't about insisting on your way or demanding others see you a certain way. It's the opposite. It's the freedom of not needing validation at all. Think about the people who have left the strongest impression on you. Chances are they weren't the ones posturing or polishing their image. They were the ones comfortable in their own skin, unshaken by approval or disapproval. That's the magnetism of authenticity. When you stop contorting yourself to fit expectations, you radiate a quiet confidence that draws others in. The Stoics called this eudaimonia, flourishing by aligning your actions with your core values. Marcus Aurelius put it bluntly: waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. No fanfare, no performance, just unwavering consistency between thought and action. Here's the paradox: the less you try to attract people, the more you will. Authenticity acts like a filter. It repels those who don't resonate with your truth and attracts those who do. When Epictetus taught, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it," he wasn't dismissing connection. He was revealing the secret to deeper relationships. People trust what's real. They sense when your words and actions match, when there's no hidden agenda. That's why authenticity builds trust effortlessly. You're not persuading or performing, you're simply being, and in that simplicity, others find a rare kind of safety. Picture two leaders, one who changes opinions to please every crowd, another who stands firm in their principles even when it's inconvenient. Who commands respect? The Stoics knew integrity is magnetic. It doesn't shout, it doesn't need to, because when you're grounded in your values, when you refuse to compromise your character for temporary gain, people notice. Not because you've announced it, but because your choices reveal it. That's the power of authenticity. It speaks louder than any sales pitch or crafted persona ever could. There's an unspoken power in silence, a quiet strength the Stoics understood better than most. While the modern world equates influence with having the loudest voice in the room, ancient wisdom points the other way. Epictetus put it plainly, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." This isn't just advice about politeness, it's a strategic tool for building presence. Think about the last time someone truly heard you, not just waited for their turn to talk, but listened with full attention. That kind of focus is rare. And when you offer it, you create a gravitational pull others can't ignore. Strategic silence isn't about holding back or fading into the background. It's about choosing your moments with intention. The Stoics knew words are currency, spend them recklessly, and they lose value. But when you speak only after deep listening, when your words carry the weight of consideration, people lean in. Picture a leader who doesn't rush to fill every pause with noise. Their silence isn't empty, it's charged with presence. That's the difference between talking at someone and communicating with them. Seneca warned, "Speech is the mirror of the soul. As a man speaks, so he is." When you master restraint, your words land differently. They carry authority not because they're loud, but because they're scarce. Here's the paradox: the less you say, the more you're heard. A well-timed pause can do more than a torrent of words. It creates space for others to reflect, to engage, to feel your confidence. Epictetus taught his students to ask themselves before speaking, is this necessary? Is it true? Is it kind? If the answer to any is no, silence becomes the wiser choice. This isn't suppression, it's curation. Every unnecessary word you withhold strengthens the impact of the ones you share. Consider how silence commands respect in moments of conflict. While others escalate with heated words, the Stoic remains composed, not indifferent but anchored. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injustice." Reacting in anger hands control to the other person, but responding with measured silence, that's power. It disarms aggression, exposes empty noise, and often reveals more truth than any rebuttal could. This principle extends beyond conversations. Silence is the foundation of observation, the ability to absorb details others miss because they're too busy projecting. Think of a negotiator who lets the other side talk first, or a mentor who waits for the right moment to offer advice. Their influence doesn't come from dominating airtime, it comes from the precision of their presence. The Stoics called this prosach attention so acute it borders on reverence. When you listen deeply, you don't just hear words, you detect hesitation, conviction, the unsaid truths lingering beneath sentences. That's how silence becomes strategic. The next time you're tempted to fill a pause, resist. Let the silence breathe. Watch how people unconsciously rise to meet the space you've held. This isn't manipulation, it's the art of creating conditions where authenticity thrives. As Epictetus reminded his students, it's not what happens to you, but how you respond that matters. In a world addicted to noise, your restraint becomes your signature. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you choose to say only what matters. In the middle of chaos, there's something almost magnetic about a person who remains unshakably calm. Not indifferent, not cold, just steady. That's the essence of emotional equilibrium, the third Stoic action that pulls people toward you without effort. Seneca, in his letters, put it this way: "A wise man is neither raised up by prosperity nor cast down by adversity." Notice he didn't say the wise man feels nothing. Stoicism isn't about suppressing emotions, it's about mastering them so they don't master you. And here's the secret: when you achieve that kind of composure, people instinctively trust you more. They feel safer around you, because in a world where most react before they think, your calm becomes a rare anchor. Picture 2 people facing the same crisis. One spirals into panic, blaming and flailing, while the other takes a breath and asks, "What's the next right step?" Who would you rather follow? This isn't just about self-control, it's about the ripple effect of your stability. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Most stress comes from our reaction to events, not the events themselves. The Stoics practiced premeditatio malorum, visualizing worst-case scenarios beforehand, not to dwell on fear but to disarm it. When you've already reckoned with potential losses or setbacks in your mind, real-life challenges lose their power to throw you off balance, and that preparedness. It's visible. People notice when you don't crumble under pressure. They're drawn to the space you create, the quiet assurance that says, "We can handle this." But emotional equilibrium isn't just for crises. It's in the small moments too, when someone cuts you off in traffic, when plans fall apart, when criticism lands. Epictetus taught, it's not things that upset us but our judgments about them. That shift from reacting to choosing your response changes everything. Imagine a colleague vents their frustration at you unfairly. The instinct might be to snap back, to defend, but the Stoic pauses. They ask, is this person harming me, or is their anger its own punishment? By refusing to mirror their chaos, you don't just escalate the situation, you reveal a deeper strength, and that's irresistibly disarming. Seneca's letters are filled with exercises for this. One of his most powerful, the Evening Review, at day's end he'd ask himself, where did I let externals dictate my peace? Where did I handle things well? This isn't self-criticism, it's refinement. Over time, you start to spot triggers before they hijack you. You begin to respond instead of react, and here's what happens externally: people start to see you as someone who can't be easily rattled. That reputation, it precedes you. It opens doors, earns respect, and builds trust without you ever demanding it. There's a practicality to this equilibrium that the Stoics loved. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. When you stop expecting the world to be fair or predictable, you free yourself from constant disappointment." That's not pessimism, it's resilience, and resilience is contagious. Think of a leader who stays composed when others are overwhelmed. Their calm isn't passive, it's active. It reassures, it guides, it leads. The irony: the less you seek validation or fear disapproval, the more influence you wield. Seneca observed, "He who fears death will never do anything worthy of a living man." Substitute death with rejection, embarrassment, or failure, the principle holds. When you're not hostage to emotional highs and lows, you make clearer decisions. You speak with conviction, not desperation. That's the kind of presence people gravitate toward, not because you're perfect, but because you're grounded. So how do you cultivate this? Start small. Next time you feel irritation rising, pause. Ask, what am I adding to this moment by reacting? Breathe like the Stoics did, deeply, intentionally. Remind yourself, emotions are signals, not steering wheels, and watch. Over time, people will start to lean into your presence like it's shelter. Because in a storm, a steady tree doesn't just survive, it becomes the place others seek refuge. The Stoics had a simple yet revolutionary way of cutting through life's noise, the dichotomy of control. Epictetus distilled it into one piercing question: what's up to us and what isn't? Most people exhaust themselves trying to manipulate outcomes, obsessing over others' opinions, fretting about external events, clinging to results they can't guarantee. But the Stoic flips the script. They pour all their energy into what's truly theirs to command: their actions, their efforts, their choices. And here's the magnetic effect: when someone operates from this unshakable focus, they radiate a confidence that's impossible to ignore. Consider two job candidates. One stumbles through their interview visibly nervous, desperate to say the right thing, their eyes darting to the interviewer's face after every answer, seeking approval. The other speaks with clarity, not because they're certain they'll get the offer, but because they've prepared thoroughly and now focus solely on presenting their honest capabilities. Who leaves the stronger impression? The first is tethered to an outcome they can't control. The second is anchored in the effort they did control. That's the power of the dichotomy. It shifts your presence from needy to self-assured, from scattered to centered. Marcus Aurelius put it bluntly, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Modern resilient leaders embody this daily. Think of a CEO navigating a company crisis. The weak leader fixates on stock prices, public perception, blame all factors outside their immediate control. The Stoic leader, though, they focus on assembling the right team, making data-driven decisions, communicating transparently. Their calm isn't indifference, it's the clarity of knowing where their agency begins and ends. This focus broadcasts a quiet authority. People sense it. They gravitate toward leaders who aren't buffeted by every shift in the wind, who don't crumble when outcomes defy expectations. The Stoics practiced this through proherses, the willful alignment with what's within their sphere of influence. Epictetus used the metaphor of an archer. You can control how carefully you aim, how steadily you draw the bow, but once the arrow flies, wind or luck may alter its path. The skilled archer doesn't judge their success by whether the target is hit, but by whether they executed each controllable step flawlessly. Apply that to modern life. A writer can't control book sales, but they can commit to daily writing. A coach can't force wins, but they can drill fundamentals relentlessly. That's the magnetism when you stop measuring yourself by externals and start taking pride in your process. People notice the shift. Your confidence stops being tied to validation, and that's when it becomes authentic. History's most compelling figures understood this. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison, focusing not on his release date, uncontrollable, but on mastering his mind, educating fellow inmates, and sharpening his vision for justice, controllable. When he finally walked free, the world didn't just see a freed prisoner, they saw a man who'd turned confinement into a forge for unbreakable resolve. That's the Stoic dichotomy in action. Here's the subtle brilliance of this practice. When you stop anxiously chasing results, you paradoxically improve them. A musician obsessed with going viral churns out derivative work, but one focused on daily practice and artistic growth. They create something worth hearing. The former reeks of desperation, the latter attracts genuine fans. Seneca captured this. Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. By fixating on preparation, the controllable, you become the kind of person opportunity favors. Try this reframe next time you face uncertainty. Instead of asking, will this work out? Ask, what's my next right move? That shift alone will change how you're perceived. People are drawn to those moving with purpose, not those paralyzed by what-ifs. The Stoics didn't just preach this, they lived it. When Marcus Aurelius lost children, faced wars, and ruled an empire in turmoil, his journal reveals zero despair over fate, only relentless attention to his own virtue. That's the ultimate magnet, a person so grounded in their agency that chaos can't erode their light. There's a quiet transformation that happens when gratitude becomes more than a habit, when it's woven into the fabric of how you see the world. The Stoics didn't just preach thankfulness, they weaponized it. Musonius Rufus, often overshadowed by Seneca and Marcus Aurelius, was relentless on this point. If you accomplish something good with hard work, the labor passes quickly, but the good endures. But Stoic gratitude isn't about plastering a smile over hardship. It's about mining even the darkest moments for the raw material of growth. And here's the magnetic effect. When you operate from this mindset, people sense an energy in you that's both grounded and luminous. Start with the Stoic morning ritual, waking and immediately asking, what am I borrowing from life today? Not in a transactional sense, but with the awe of someone handed a priceless gift. Your breath, your mind, the chance to try again. Marcus Aurelius wrote, when you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. This isn't fluffy optimism, it's strategic recalibration. By anchoring your day in gratitude, you short-circuit envy before it takes hold. You enter rooms less preoccupied with what you lack, more attuned to what you can contribute. And that shift, it's palpable. people are drawn to those who carry an air of abundance rather than scarcity. Consider two colleagues facing the same setback. One fixates on the unfairness, the lost opportunity. The other acknowledges the sting, then asks, what did this reveal about my resilience? What doors might this close to open better ones? The difference isn't denial, it's perspective. Gratitude in Stoicism acts like a mental alchemy. It doesn't erase pain but transmutes it into fuel. Seneca, writing to Lucilius after a devastating fire destroyed much of Lyons, didn't dismiss the tragedy. Instead, he focused on the deeper truth. Losses make us reevaluate what's truly ours. Nothing external is permanent. Only your character sticks with you. That's the kind of gratitude that radiates, not performative positivity, but a rooted appreciation for the unshakable core no circumstance can take. The Stoics took this further with negative visualization, a practice that sounds morbid but delivers profound liberation. Picture losing what you cherish most, your health, your relationships, your freedom. Sit with that sting, then open your eyes to the reality that for now these gifts remain. This isn't fear-mongering, it's wakefulness. By mentally rehearsing loss, you strip away taking things for granted. Epictetus, born a slave, understood this intimately. He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has. When you operate from that place of conscious appreciation, your presence carries a weight. People notice when you listen like it might be your last conversation, when you savor small joys without rushing to the next distraction. Gratitude also disarms hostility like nothing else. Imagine receiving harsh criticism. The ego's response is defensiveness, the Stoic response, thank you. What can I learn here? That pivot doesn't just diffuse tension, it elevates you. Musonius Rufus taught that even adversaries become teachers if we let them. If someone speaks ill of you, consider whether they've told the truth. If yes, correct yourself. If no, laugh at the irrelevance. This attitude, part gratitude, part steel, creates a paradox. The less you need validation, the more respect you command. The modern world mistakes gratitude for passivity. The Stoics knew better. Thankfulness was their sharpest tool for agency. By focusing on what's enough, you're freed from endless wanting. That doesn't mean complacency. It means your ambition comes from a place of expansion, not lack. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire but wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life." When you embody that balance, striving yet satisfied, you become a mirror for others. They start questioning their own restless chasing. Practical application. End each day like the Stoics with an evening audit. Not just tallying tasks, but asking, where did I receive unexpected help today? Who or what made my efforts easier? This isn't about keeping score. It's about training your attention to spot the invisible supports, the coworker who handed you data early, the fact your body carried you without complaint. Over time, this practice rewires your default setting from entitlement to appreciation, and people gravitate toward that. Not because you're announcing your thankfulness, but because you're living it in your patience, your generosity, your refusal to take good fortune for granted. Gratitude, in the Stoic sense, is the ultimate hack for influence, not because it manipulates, but because it fundamentally alters how you occupy space. When you stop seeing life as owing you and start seeing it as gifting you, your energy shifts from grasping to grounded. And in a world starved for authenticity, that's the rarest kind of magnetism. Imagine holding a glass of water so tightly that your knuckles turn white. The harder you grip, the more likely you are to spill it or shatter the glass entirely. That's what attachment to external validation does to your presence. The Stoics called this apatheia, not apathy, but the art of non-attachment. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, demonstrated this in ways that still resonate today. After losing his entire fortune in a shipwreck, he didn't beg for sympathy or scramble to rebuild his status. Instead, he walked into Athens and declared, "Fortune has done me a favor. Now I can truly practice philosophy." That shift from clinging to what was lost to embracing what remained reveals the magnetic power of detachment. People chase approval like it's oxygen, unaware that the very pursuit suffocates their appeal. Here's the paradox: the less you need admiration, the more effortlessly it finds you. Epictetus, born into slavery, understood this deeply. He taught that freedom isn't won by changing your circumstances, but by changing your relationship to them. Picture two artists. One obsesses over likes and comments, tweaking their work to fit trends. The other creates from an unshakable inner compass, valuing expression over applause. Over time, guess whose art commands respect? The Stoics didn't reject praise, they simply refused to let it dictate their worth. Marcus Aurelius scribbled reminders like this in his journal. It's silly to try to escape other people's faults. They're inescapable, just try to escape your own. Zeno's life offers a masterclass in this principle. When critics mocked his philosophy, he didn't fire back with defenses. He smiled and said, "If ridicule could destroy truth, no truth would remain." That quiet confidence didn't repel skeptics, it disarmed them. His indifference to their jabs didn't signal weakness, it broadcasted a strength no insult could touch. The modern equivalent: a leader who doesn't pivot their values with every opinion poll, or a creator who shares work without refreshing metrics compulsively. Detachment isn't about not caring, it's about caring more for the right things. This is where Stoic wisdom flips conventional thinking. Society tells us validation confirms our value. The Stoics retort, "Why outsource your self-assessment to others?" Seneca captured it perfectly. A man who fears death will never do anything worthy of a living man. Replace death with rejection, and the lesson holds. When you stop needing the crowd's cheers to feel successful, you become fearless, and fearlessness is magnetic. Think of a public speaker who stumbles but recovers with grace. Their mistake doesn't define them, their poise does. But detachment isn't passivity. The Stoics were deeply engaged with the world, they just refused to be enslaved by its judgments. Here's the key distinction: chasing approval shrinks your options, non-attachment expands them. Musonius Rufus taught his students to welcome criticism as a diagnostic tool, not as a verdict. If the critique is true, correct yourself. If false, why distress over fiction? That mindset frees you to innovate, to take risks, to stand firm when others waver. History's most influential figures shared this trait. Mandela didn't moderate his vision to please captors. Edison embraced thousands of failures before breakthroughs. Their resilience wasn't despite indifference to approval, it was because of it. Practical application: start small. Next time you share an idea, resist the urge to scan faces for reactions. Speak as if the value of your words exists independent of applause. When someone praises you, receive it with gratitude, but don't cling to it as fuel. Epictetus advised, if someone tells you that so and so speaks ill of you, don't defend yourself against the story. Reply, yes, and he doesn't know my other faults, or he would have mentioned them too. That humor isn't self-deprecation, it's liberation. It says, your judgment doesn't hold the keys to my worth. The ultimate test of detachment, how you handle obscurity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, the stench of decay is universal. All fame is fleeting. That's not cynicism, it's perspective. When you create, lead, or love without demanding immortality for your efforts, you tap into a purer form of expression. No one is drawn to desperation, but the person who acts because it's right, not because it's rewarded. That's a presence people remember long after the crowd moves on. Zeno's shipwreck didn't diminish him, it revealed him. Stripped of wealth, he discovered a wealth no storm could sink. That's the invitation here, to let go of the weights that drag your authenticity underwater. Not to care less about life, but to care more deeply about the things that no external force can take. When you master that balance, you don't just attract admiration, you redefine what's truly admirable. History remembers leaders not for their titles, but for what they stood for when no one was watching. That's the difference between virtue and ego. One builds legacies, the other burns them. The Stoics didn't just admire moral excellence, they treated it as the only true measure of success. Cato the Younger, a Roman senator and Stoic icon, was so renowned for his integrity that even his enemies hesitated to bribe him. Why? Because they knew his principles weren't negotiable. Plutarch recounts how Cato would walk through Rome barefoot, wearing rags, just to prove luxury couldn't sway him. That's not showmanship, it's the kind of radical consistency that makes followers out of skeptics. Ego-driven leaders chase applause, virtue-driven leaders chase truth. The moment you prioritize looking good over doing good, you trade influence for insecurity. Marcus Aurelius warned, "The applause of the crowd means nothing to you if your own hands aren't clean." Think of a modern executive who takes credit for team wins but dodges blame for failures. Contrast that with a leader who publicly owns mistakes and deflects praise to their team. Who commands deeper respect? Stoic virtue, wisdom, courage, justice, temperance isn't performative. It's the quiet discipline of doing right when shortcuts beckon. Cato's life is a masterclass in this. During a heated debate, his political rival Pompey ordered armed guards into the Senate to intimidate him. Cato didn't flinch. He kept speaking even as the soldiers dragged him out. Later, when Julius Caesar offered him a pardon after civil war, a gesture meant to humiliate, Cato chose suicide over compromising his ideals. Extreme, perhaps, but his death wasn't defeat. It was the ultimate testimony to a life lived without moral bargaining. Centuries later, George Washington would stage plays about Cato to inspire revolutionary troops. That's the longevity of virtue. Here's the paradox the Stoics uncovered. The less you need to be seen as a leader, the more people see you as one. Humility isn't weakness, it's the confidence to let actions speak. Epictetus, once a slave, taught, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Modern examples abound. Consider a scientist who credits their team in Nobel acceptance speeches, or a CEO who takes a pay cut to avoid layoffs. These aren't just nice gestures, they're strategic displays of character that forge unshakable loyalty. Teams fight harder for leaders who fight for them first. Justice in Stoicism isn't abstract, it's the daily practice of fairness when no one's counting. Seneca wrote, "A sword never kills anybody, it's a tool in the killer's hand." Likewise, authority doesn't corrupt, it reveals. Power amplifies who you already are. That's why Stoics like Marcus Aurelius preemptively examined their motives. Search your heart. Are you doing this to be seen or because it's right? When a leader's decisions align with that question, trust becomes automatic. Employees don't wonder about hidden agendas. Followers don't brace for betrayal. Courage in this context isn't recklessness, it's the willingness to endure discomfort for principle. Picture a whistleblower exposing corruption despite career risks, or a junior employee speaking truth to power. Their strength doesn't come from defiance, but from alignment with something larger than themselves. The Stoic definition of courage includes vulnerability, admitting when you're wrong, apologizing when you've hurt others, resisting the ego's urge to double down. Epictetus, who endured a lifetime of physical pain from a crippled leg, redefined disability. Lameness is an impediment to the leg, not to the will. Temperance is the unsung hero of leadership. It's the CEO who avoids lavish perks while employees struggle, the politician who refuses smear tactics despite provocation. Cato famously rejected gifts from foreign dignitaries, even tokens like perfumes, calling them weapons against Roman virtue. Modern equivalents: the manager who shuts down office gossip instead of indulging it, or the influencer who turns down lucrative deals that misalign with values. Restraint signals control, not over others, but over yourself. The ripple effect of virtue is undeniable. Teams mirror a leader's ethics. Children absorb a parent's integrity. Seneca observed, "No one can long hide behind a mask. The affectation soon becomes the face." That's why the Stoics obsessed over character. It's the foundation of all sustainable influence. You can't script authenticity, you can't fake consistency, but when you lead with virtue, you don't need to. Like Cato, you become a living standard, one that outlasts titles, triumphs, and even time itself. Imagine owning so little that you could fit your entire life into a single wooden bowl. That's exactly what Diogenes did, and when he saw a child drinking water with cupped hands, he smashed the bowl, realizing even that was excess. This isn't just ancient eccentricity, it's Stoic minimalism in its purest form. The less you need to feel content, the more unshakable your confidence becomes. Seneca put it bluntly, it is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more who is poor. There's a magnetic attraction to those who have mastered this, people who aren't defined by their possessions but by their presence. Materialism is a race without a finish line. The Stoics saw this early. Clutter, whether physical or mental, dilutes your power. Think of two travelers, one burdened by heavy luggage, glancing nervously at each jostle, while the other moves freely with just a small pack. Who commands the room? Diogenes took this further, living in a barrel and mocking Alexander the Great's conquests with a single request: "Step aside, you're blocking my sunlight." That wasn't poverty, it was liberation. His simplicity wasn't about lacking, it was about rejecting anything that could make him dependent. And that's the secret. When your happiness isn't tied to externals, you radiate a rare kind of autonomy. Modern psychology echoes this. The hedonic treadmill shows how we adapt to luxuries, constantly chasing the next thing without lasting satisfaction. The Stoic solution: deliberately practice wanting less. Musonius Rufus taught that hard beds and plain food weren't punishments, they were training. How can someone used to silk sheets appreciate life's real riches? He'd ask, this isn't about austerity for its own sake. It's about detaching your self-worth from objects so your confidence comes from within. Picture a colleague who wears the same simple outfit daily versus one obsessed with designer labels. The first isn't making a statement, they're too focused on their work to care, and that lack of pretense, it's compelling. Diogenes' extremism makes us laugh, but it reveals a profound truth. Minimalism isn't about counting possessions, it's about removing distractions that obscure your purpose. When Alexander offered him anything he desired, Diogenes didn't ask for gold or land. He said, "Stop casting shadows on me." That reply wasn't cheeky, it was strategic. By refusing even symbolic dependence, he demonstrated true sovereignty. Modern equivalents: the executive who wears a uniform to conserve decision energy, or the artist who creates in a sparse studio to mute external noise. Their environments aren't empty, they're curated to amplify what matters. Here's the paradox: simplicity amplifies your presence. A cluttered life scatters attention, a focused one commands it. Marcus Aurelius, despite ruling an empire, slept on a military cot and wore plain robes. The body's needs are few, he wrote, and easily obtained. That clarity let him lead without being drained by desire. Today's version: the entrepreneur who invests in experiences over gadgets, or the parent who prioritizes connection over expensive toys. Their restraint isn't lack, it's abundance redirected. Practical steps start with the Stoic subtraction exercise. Each week, remove one non-essential: a social media app, a subscription, an unnecessary purchase. Notice how space opens for deeper engagement. Epictetus advised, wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. When you internalize that, your posture changes. You stop competing in visible consumption and start excelling in invisible substance. People sense the shift, the calm of someone who can't be baited by trends or status symbols. Diogenes carried a lamp in daylight, searching for an honest man. His real lesson: the fewer masks we wear, literal or metaphorical, the brighter our light becomes. In a world drowning in excess, the most radical act might just be choosing enough. What if every setback you faced wasn't a roadblock but the very path forward? That's the heart of the Stoic practice known as amor fati, loving fate. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled Rome through plague, war, and betrayal, scribbled in his private journal, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This wasn't naive optimism. It was a radical reframe, one that didn't just help him survive adversity, but wield it as a tool. When you master this shift, something fascinating happens. People don't just admire your resilience, they're drawn to the way you transform stumbling blocks into stepping stones. Take Marcus' own life. At 12, he lost his father. As emperor, he buried 8 children. He governed during a pandemic that killed millions, faced repeated invasions, and endured betrayal by his closest general. Yet his writings reveal zero self-pity. Instead, he wrote, "The blazing fire makes flames and brightness out of everything thrown into it." That's the alchemy of the obstacle mindset. While others saw crises, Marcus saw raw material. When barbarians threatened the empire, he didn't just defend borders, he used the conflict to refine his leadership, writing, "Our enemies are our teachers." That posture, part acceptance, part ingenuity, didn't weaken him. It made him legendary. Centuries later, we still study his reign not because it was easy, but because he demonstrated how pressure forges greatness. Modern psychology confirms what the Stoics knew. Resilience isn't about bouncing back, it's about bouncing forward. Research on post-traumatic growth shows that those who actively seek meaning in hardship often emerge stronger than before. Think of a startup founder whose failed venture taught them industry gaps they later filled, or an athlete whose injury forced them to develop mental stamina that outlasted physical limits. The difference lies in perspective. Epictetus, born a slave and crippled by his master's brutality, put it plainly, difficulty shows what men are. When you treat obstacles as information rather than injustice, you stop resisting and start leveraging. Here's the magnetic effect of this mindset. People are instinctively drawn to those who handle turbulence with curiosity rather than complaint. Picture 2 colleagues facing a cancelled project. One rants about wasted effort, the other analyzes, what did this reveal about market needs? How can these insights fuel our next move? The latter doesn't just cope, they inspire. Seneca, exiled to Corsica's harsh conditions, didn't languish. He produced his greatest writings there, noting, "A gem cannot be polished without friction." That's the essence of obstacle as opportunity. It's not denying pain, it's refusing to let pain dictate your trajectory. Practical application: start small. Next time you hit a delay, a traffic jam, a missed deadline, ask, what can this make space for? A traffic jam becomes podcast time. A rejected proposal highlights areas for sharper articulation. Marcus Aurelius called this seeing with new eyes. The Stoics practiced premeditatio malorum, premeditating evils, not to dwell on doom but to rehearse adaptability. By mentally walking through worst-case scenarios, they stripped challenges of their power to shock. Modern parallels, fire drills, crisis simulations, even premortem analyses in business. Preparation doesn't prevent storms, it lets you dance in the rain while others seek shelter. The deepest lesson here isn't just personal growth, it's influence. When you model obstacle alchemy, you give others permission to reframe their struggles. A leader who admits, "This setback revealed our blind spots, let's use them," transforms team morale. A parent who says, "This disappointment taught me," raises resilient kids. Marcus didn't write meditations for publication. He wrote to remind himself, the obstacle is the advantage. Yet his private struggle became a public masterclass. That's the paradox. By focusing on your own growth through difficulty, you unconsciously guide others. Your resilience becomes a beacon, so the next time life throws a boulder in your path, hear Epictetus' challenge. Do you want to be the anvil or the hammer? The anvil suffers the blows, the hammer uses them to shape the world. Your choice doesn't just determine your fate, it ripples outward, attracting those hungry for the same unshakable clarity. Words are currency, spend them wisely. The Stoics didn't just preach brevity, they treated speech like a scalpel, precise and purposeful. Epictetus warned his students, first learn the meaning of what you say, then speak. Imagine two speakers addressing a crowd. One rambles in paragraphs, the other delivers two sentences that linger for decades, whose voice carries further. The power isn't in volume, it's in resonance. Ancient Rome's greatest speeches could fit on a single scroll. Today, we drown in millions of tweets and endless meetings, yet struggle to recall a single memorable line from either. There's a magnetism to those who break the pattern, who measure their words like gold. Marcus Aurelius modeled this daily. His journal entries weren't lengthy dissertations, they were razor-sharp reminders. You don't have to have an opinion, or waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Notice the pattern, no filler, no flattery, just truth distilled to its essence. The modern equivalent. Think of leaders like Churchill, whose wartime speeches averaged fewer than 3 syllables per word, or Steve Jobs, who turned product launches into masterclasses of minimalist impact. The more noise surrounds us, the more silence and carefully chosen words stand out. But Stoic brevity isn't about saying less for its own sake. It's about removing everything that dilutes meaning. Seneca compared overwriting to overeating. Food regurgitated before digestion nourishes neither. When we vomit every half-formed thought onto social media or pad emails with disclaimers, we train others to tune us out. Contrast that with a mentor who waits 3 beats before responding, then offers one sentence that reframes everything. Their restraint signals confidence. They trust their words enough not to cheapen them with excess. The irony, in an age of constant communication, we've forgotten how to communicate. Ancient senators didn't have reply-all email chains or brainstorming sessions. They practiced sententiae, condensing arguments into memorable, actionable lines. Cato the Younger could halt debate with 3 words: Ceterum censeo Carthaginem est delendum. Furthermore, I consider that Carthage must be destroyed. No PowerPoint, no bullet points, just conviction crystallized. Today's version isn't a TD talk. It's the founder who replaces a 30-slide deck with, here's what we're solving and why it matters. Here's the shift. Intentional speech isn't just about efficiency. It's about respect for your audience's time and your own integrity. Epictetus taught, if you speak frequently, you're likely to say what you don't mean. Ever witnessed a negotiator who says little but lands every point, or a partner who stays quiet during an argument, then cuts through tension with one observation? Their power comes from scarcity. Like a composer who knows rests are part of the music, they understand silence amplifies speech. Practical application. Borrow the Stoic pause. Before speaking, ask Epictetus' triple filter. Is this necessary? Is it true? Is it kind? Modern leaders like Angela Merkel mastered this. Her nickname, Mutty Mother, stemmed from a demeanor that balanced warmth with unwavering economy of words. When the 2008 financial crisis hit, her 7-word assurance, "We have done what was necessary," steadied a continent. That's the alchemy of precision. The right words at the right time don't just inform, they anchor. The next time you prepare to speak, picture Zeno holding his hand up to pause a student mid-sentence. The reason you have 2 ears and 1 mouth is to listen more and speak less. In a world where everyone's broadcasting, the real power lies in transmitting, curating ideas until they're potent enough to land without force. Your voice isn't measured by airtime, but by the weight it carries when you choose to use it. Patience isn't passive waiting, it's active endurance with purpose. The Stoics didn't just tolerate delays, they trained to embrace them as opportunities to strengthen resolve. Seneca, who spent years in exile, wrote, "Time discovers truth." His letters reveal a man who saw enforced waiting not as punishment but as preparation. Imagine 2 travelers stranded by a storm. One paces anxiously, cursing the wind, while the other settles by the fire to sharpen his tools. Both face the same delay, but only one emerges better equipped. That's the Stoic difference. Patience isn't about killing time, but redeeming it. Consider how this plays out in modern crises. A CEO navigating supply chain chaos can rant about disruptions or use the pause to streamline operations. A parent stuck in a doctor's office can scroll mindlessly or engage their child in conversation that deepens connection. The Stoic approach transforms waiting into training. Marcus Aurelius advised, "The art of living is more like wrestling than dancing because it requires readiness to stand firm against sudden attacks." Every delay is a chance to practice that stance. When you refuse to let frustration hijack your focus, you become a rare anchor in chaotic seas, someone others instinctively turn to when storms hit. Seneca took this further with his 3 disciplines exercise. When faced with interruptions, he'd ask, "What can I control here? What can I learn? How can this serve my growth?" History's most composed figures operated this way. Nelson Mandela turned 27 prison years into a masterclass in self-mastery, studying law and mentoring fellow inmates. Had he merely counted days until release, he'd have exited broken. Instead, he emerged as the leader South Africa needed. That's patience redefined, not as endurance but as investment. The magnetic effect of this mindset is undeniable. Picture a crowded airport during cancellations. Most passengers groan at agents. One sits quietly reading, then offers a grateful smile when lines finally move. Who stands out? Not because they're passive, but because their calm elevates the room. Epictetus taught, "No one can steal your peace unless you hand it over." Patience is the ultimate proof of that truth, a lived demonstration that external chaos needn't dictate internal stability. Practical application: start with micro pauses. When your phone pings, resist the reflex to check it immediately. When coffee takes longer to brew, use the seconds to stretch or breathe. These seem insignificant, but they rewire impulse patterns. Seneca compared patience to building muscles. Small daily efforts yield strength no sudden exertion could. Modern research agrees. Studies on delayed gratification show those who tolerate short-term discomfort often outperform peers in long-term success. The deepest lesson lies in crises. When a project fails or relationships fray, impatient people demand quick fixes, often making things worse. The Stoic responds differently. They ask, "What if this delay is protecting me from a misstep? What if this struggle is forging resilience I'll need later?" Ancient shipbuilders knew green wood warps, seasoned timber holds fast. Human growth follows the same rule. Rushed progress often crumbles under pressure. Seneca's exile produced his greatest works. Beethoven's deafness birthed his boldest compositions. Your delays, they're not roadblocks, they're the hidden curriculum of mastery. As Marcus Aurelius whispered to himself during Rome's darkest hours, the obstacle is the fuel. Consider this: the Roman Stoics would begin their days by visualizing not just success, but disaster, losing their wealth, their health, even their loved ones. This wasn't pessimism, it was emotional armor. They called it premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils, and it transformed fear into fuel. Seneca wrote, "He robs present ills of their power who has perceived their coming beforehand." By mentally rehearsing life's harshest blows, they didn't just brace for impact, they hollowed out a space where setbacks lost their sting. And here's the magnetic effect: when you've already walked through fire in your mind, real-world chaos can't shake your composure. People notice that unflappable calm, the leader who doesn't panic when markets crash, the parent who stays steady during a child's meltdown. That's not luck, it's trained resilience radiating outward. History's greatest strategists used this tool long before cognitive behavioral therapy coined exposure therapy. Take Admiral James Stockdale, shot down over Vietnam and imprisoned for 7 years. Tortured routinely, he credited his survival to Epictetus' teachings. You must discipline yourself to confront what you dread most. each night in his cell, he'd visualize interrogation scenarios, not to dwell on pain, but to prepare his response. When guards threatened him, he'd already faced worse in his mind. His captors soon realized they couldn't break him. His calm became a rallying point for fellow prisoners. That's the paradox of premeditatio malorum. By regularly visiting the worst-case scenario, you drain it of surprise, and when others see you navigate crises with eerie poise, they're drawn to your grounded presence like moths to flame. Modern psychology validates this ancient practice. Studies on stress inoculation show that pilots who mentally rehearse engine failures perform better in real emergencies. Entrepreneurs who envision bankruptcy make smarter risks. Why? Because anticipation rewires your brain's threat response. The amygdala, your panic button, stops hijacking your prefrontal cortex when it recognizes familiar scenarios. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, writing, "Begin each day by telling yourself, 'Today I shall meet interference, ingratitude, insolence.' Notice he didn't say if. By expecting life's friction, he never wasted energy on outrage when it arrived. His journals reveal a man who ruled an empire in chaos, yet remained so composed that aides marveled at his stillness in the storm. Here's how to apply this like a Stoic. Before high-stakes moments, a pitch, a difficult conversation, a medical test, spend 3 minutes visualizing not just success, but the worst realistic outcome. The client says no, the conversation turns hostile, the results aren't ideal. Now imagine yourself responding with dignity, recalibrating, seeking solutions, refusing to crumble. This isn't manifesting failure, it's vaccinating against shock. Navy SEAL train this way, their infamous 40% rule, that most quit when they've only expended 40% of their capacity stems from pre-exhausting mental collapse in training. When teammates see someone hit a wall and keep going, morale skyrockets. That's the leadership secret hidden in premeditatio malorum. People follow those who have already mapped the mineshaft. The technique's brilliance lies in its dual effect. Internally, it builds emotional calluses. Externally, it broadcasts unshakable competence. Picture 2 surgeons scrubbing in for a risky procedure. One whispers, "I hope nothing goes wrong." The other has mentally rehearsed every complication: bleeding, equipment failure, allergic reactions. Who would you trust with your life? The Stoics understood that confidence isn't born from blind optimism, but from thorough preparation. Seneca advised Lucilius, "Misfortune weighs most heavily on those who expect nothing but good fortune." Even love benefits from this clear-eyed approach. The Stoics would ponder not just a partner's virtues but their flaws, not to breed cynicism but to prevent disillusionment. Epictetus told students, "When you kiss your child, whisper to yourself, 'Tomorrow you may die.' Morbid, only if misunderstood. The exercise wasn't about fear, it was about savoring without clinging." Relationships anchored in this honesty avoid the whiplash of idealization. And here's the unexpected reward. Partners who have imagined loss often love more deeply, listen more intently, argue more fairly because they've rehearsed taking nothing for granted. Financial independence guru Mr. Money Mustache embodies this in the modern age. Before retiring at 30, he'd ask, "What if the stock market drops 50% the day after I quit?" By stress testing his plans against catastrophe, he built a life where volatility couldn't rattle him. Followers don't just admire his bank balance, they're magnetized by his indifference to economic panics. That's the allure of someone who's walked through fire in their mind. Real flames hold no terror. The final twist, premeditatio malorum, doesn't just prepare you for the worst, it heightens appreciation for the present. Seneca noted, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." By regularly visiting hypothetical lows, you return to your actual life with sharper gratitude. The coffee tastes richer, the laughter rings louder, the mundane glows with temporary beauty, and that more than any material success is what makes a presence magnetic, not the absence of fear but the quiet mastery of it. Others will wonder at your calm, never guessing you've already weathered 1,000 storms behind your eyes. Actions speak louder than philosophies. This wasn't just a saying to the Stoics, it was a way of life. Epictetus, the former slave-turned-philosopher, had little patience for students who could quote doctrines but crumpled under pressure. If you've merely swallowed wisdom without digesting it, he scoffed, you'll vomit it up when tested. His disdain wasn't for learning, but for performative enlightenment, the gap between what people claim to believe and how they actually behave. There's a magnetic pull to those who bridge that gap effortlessly, whose daily choices align so precisely with their values that no manifesto is needed. Their lives are their argument. History's most revered figures mastered this. George Washington didn't lecture about integrity. He returned his military salary during the Revolution when funds were low. Rosa Parks didn't give speeches about courage before her famous bus protest. She'd spent years quietly preparing through civil rights training. Their power came from a simple truth: consistency over time becomes credibility. Marcus Aurelius never published Meditations. It was his private journal, never meant for acclaim. Yet centuries later, we study it because his writings matched his reign. He didn't preach patience. He governed through plague and war without succumbing to rage or despair. That congruence between word and deed is what Stoics called synkatathesis, the alignment of inner convictions with outward actions. Modern culture often confuses visibility with virtue. Social media rewards pronouncements over perseverance, hashtags over habit. But the Stoics measured character in silent choices: the executive who declines a shady deal when no one's watching, the parent who models kindness even when tired. Epictetus warned, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. This principle exposes a fascinating paradox: the less you announce your values, the more others recognize them. Think of a coworker who never complains about deadlines but always delivers early, or a friend who listens more than they opine. Their reliability speaks volumes without needing a microphone. Consider two leaders. One gives rousing speeches about accountability but blames teams for failures. The other acknowledges missteps openly and shares credit generously. Who inspires deeper loyalty? The Stoics' new reputation isn't built through self-promotion, but through the compound interest of small, honest actions. Seneca observed, a man's character is revealed by how he treats those who can do nothing for him. That janitor you greet by name, the intern whose idea you champion, these seemingly minor gestures weave the tapestry of how others perceive you. The ancient world offered a striking test of this principle: the philosophical beard. Stoic men often grew beards not as fashion statements but as public commitments. Their faces became reminders to act in accordance with their teachings. A Stoic with a neatly trimmed beard but a volatile temper would face ridicule for the disconnect. Today's equivalent might be the entrepreneur whose branding touts transparency while hiding product flaws, or the influencer preaching mindfulness while obsessively tracking likes. Authenticity isn't declared, it's demonstrated through frictionless consistency. Practical application. Start with the Stoic evening review. Ask not just what did I do today, but how did my actions reflect my principles? Did kindness guide your decisions when irritated? Did courage override convenience? Marcus Aurelius modeled this brutally honest accounting. When you've done well and another has benefited, why seek a third reward the fame of good deeds? That's the essence: acting rightly because it's right, not for applause. Over time, this practice strips away performative virtue, leaving only the kind that shines when no one's looking. The ultimate test comes under pressure. When competitors spread rumors, does your restraint hold? When exhausted, do shortcuts tempt you? Epictetus likened character to a dyed fabric. Its true color shows when soaked in adversity. Modern research supports this. Studies on trust find that people instinctively monitor consistency between promises and follow through, with even minor lapses eroding confidence. The reverse is also true. those whose daily choices, holding a door, honoring a commitment, admitting ignorance, accumulate into an unshakable reputation. No marketing needed. A final thought from Zeno, the founder of Stoicism. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we can listen twice as much as we speak. But the deeper lesson lies in what we do with what we hear. When empathy moves you to act, when patience stops you from reacting, when integrity overrides impulse, that's when philosophy stops being words and starts breathing through your life. And that's the quiet power no resume can capture, but no one can ignore. Death is not the opposite of life, it's the frame that gives life its shape. The Stoics didn't shy from this truth, they leaned into it with a practice called Memento Mori, remembering you must die. Far from morbid fixation, this was their secret weapon for cutting through trivialities and living with fierce authenticity. Marcus Aurelius scribbled in his journal, "You could leave life right now." Let that determine what you do and say and think. Notice the urgency, not panic but precision. When you internalize that today could be your last, you stop postponing what matters. The meeting you dread, the apology you've delayed, the project you've sidelined, mortality's whisper strips away the excuses. And here's the magnetic effect. People are drawn to those who live with this kind of unflinching presence. Consider how Marcus governed Rome under this lens. Plague killed millions during his reign. Wars raged, yet his writings reveal zero despair, instead, a laser focus on ruling justly while he still could. "Do every act of your life as if it were your last," he wrote. That's not fatalism, it's liberation. Picture 2 leaders, one micromanages legacy, the other acts with quiet conviction, knowing empires outlive emperors. Who commands deeper respect? The Stoics didn't see death as an end, but as the ultimate accountability partner. Seneca put it bluntly, life's not short, we make it so by wasting time. When you live as if time's a currency you can't hoard, your priorities become contagious. Modern psychology echoes this ancient wisdom. Studies on terminality awareness, the conscious acknowledgement of life's finitude, show it sharpens decision-making and amplifies joy. Patients facing mortality often report paradoxical clarity. Petty grudges dissolve, authentic connections flourish. The Stoics engineered this mindset proactively. Epictetus told his students, "Keep death and exile before your eyes daily, along with everything that seems terrible, for then you'll never have a base thought nor crave excess." That's the alchemy of Memento Mori. By staring into the abyss regularly, you stop fearing its shadow. History's most vibrant figures embodied this. Steve Jobs famously said, "Remembering I'll be dead soon is the best tool I've ever encountered to make big choices." His Stanford commencement speech wasn't about success tactics, it was about mortality's clarifying power. The artist Frida Kahlo painted her pain and mortality relentlessly, not to wallow but to affirm, "I am here now." These weren't melancholic minds, they were luminaries who used life's brevity as a whetstone for brilliance. Practical application: start small. Place a physical reminder, a skull ring, an hourglass, even a sticky note, where you'll see it daily. Not to brood, but to awaken. Before reacting to criticism or delaying a dream, ask Marcus' question. If this were my last year, would this matter? The modern world drowns us in trivial urgencies, notifications, comparisons, manufactured dramas. Memento Mori cuts through like a scalpel. As Seneca wrote to Lucilius, "We are dying every day. The portion of life already lived is dead." The deepest gift of this practice. It reveals love's true currency. The Stoics kissed their children knowing they might not return from war. They parted from friends without assurance of reunion. That awareness didn't paralyze them, it deepened their presence. Think of a parent fully engaged in a child's bedtime story, a partner truly listening over dinner. Their attention isn't divided because they grasp the unspoken truth. This moment is alone, not a possession. Marcus' journal holds the ultimate key. Think of yourself as dead. You have lived your life, now take what's left and live it properly. That shift from fearing death to leveraging its inevitability transforms how you walk through the world. Not with morbid weight, but with levity and focus. And that's the paradox. Those who embrace impermanence don't fade into the background. They burn brighter, drawing others to their flame. Words are seeds, plant gossip and complaint, and you harvest a toxic garden. The Stoics understood this intimately, treating speech not just as communication, but as cultivation. Epictetus laid down a brutal rule. If someone speaks badly of you, resist the temptation to defend yourself. Instead, ask, how did he come to overlook my other faults? That twist, turning slander into self-assessment, reveals the Stoic stance on toxic speech. It's not just harmful to others, it degrades the speaker. In a world where venting passes for bonding and gossip masquerades as connection, avoiding this trap doesn't just purify your character, it makes you a sanctuary. Modern culture often confuses catharsis with poison. The co-worker who just needs to vent about the boss, the friend who dissects mutual acquaintances under the guise of concern. These habits aren't harmless. Psychological studies show that complaining rewires the brain for negativity, while gossip activates the same neural pathways as physical pain in the targeted person. The Stoics anticipated this 2 millennia ago. Marcus Aurelius cautioned, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Spend hours dissecting others' flaws, and you don't just describe darkness, you absorb it. Now picture 2 colleagues in a stressful workplace. One fuels lunch breaks with complaints about management. The other acknowledges challenges but pivots to solutions. What if we prototype a new process? Over time, notice the shift. The complainer drains energy. The solution builder becomes a gravitational center. Seneca observed, fire tests gold, adversity tests strong men. Toxic speech isn't just noise, it's a test. Every time you resist joining the gripe session, you don't just abstain, you ascend. The Stoics took this further with prosauch attention to mental habits. Before speaking, they'd run a 3-filter test. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? Missing any pillar, silence prevailed. Modern parallels. Think of leaders like Nelson Mandela, who forbade ANC members from disparaging their jailers during negotiations. His rationale: resentment is like drinking poison and hoping it kills your enemies. That discipline, channeling frustration into strategy rather than slander, didn't weaken his position, it made him untouchable. Here's the magnetic effect. When you refuse to traffic in negativity, you become a rare oasis. People sense the safety in your presence, that you won't weaponize their vulnerabilities or twist their words. Epictetus noted, what others say about you is their problem. What you repeat about others becomes yours. Contrast 2 friends. One eggs on your rants about your partner's flaws. The other asks, what drew you to them initially? The first keeps you stuck. The second helps you rediscover perspective. Gossip also betrays a deeper insecurity, the need to elevate oneself by diminishing others. The Stoics called this kenodoxia, empty glory. Musonius Rufus taught, we disgrace ourselves when we measure our worth against others' failings. Picture a social climber who whispers about a rival's misfortunes versus a peer who acknowledges others' successes without envy. The latter doesn't just demonstrate maturity, they command respect that no amount of schadenfreude can buy. Practical application: start with substitution. Next time you're tempted to vent, ask, what outcome do I truly want? If it's change, strategize. If it's validation, seek constructive feedback. For gossip, apply the tombstone test. Would I want this inscribed on my grave? Marcus Aurelius kept a private mantra: speak only what's worthy of your soul's dignity. That standard, holding speech to the level of legacy, transforms how you engage. The ultimate test comes when others try to pull you into negativity. A Stoic doesn't preach or judge, they redirect. Imagine responding to office drama with, I'd hate to reduce her to one mistake. What's something you admire about her work? This isn't naivety, it's alchemy. You convert poison into possibility. Epictetus promised, no one can harm you without your consent. When you refuse to let toxic speech pass your lips, you revoke its power to define your character. In an age where viral outrage and snark dominate, the rarest commodity isn't wit, it's warmth. The person who listens deeply, speaks sparingly, and refuses to indulge in scorn. They don't just avoid toxicity, they become antidote, and that's a presence no amount of gossip could diminish. Imagine your mind as an ancient fortress, impenetrable gates, towering walls, yet with bridges carefully lowered only for those who have earned trust. That's the Stoic concept of the inner citadel, a mental stronghold where your peace remains unassailable. Seneca described it best: within this fortress, nothing can be harmed unless you open the gates yourself. This isn't about isolation, it's about sovereignty. When you master the art of emotional boundaries, something fascinating happens. You don't push people away. You attract those who respect your walls while repelling those who'd storm them. Think of it like this: a castle with no defenses becomes a battleground for every passing invader. But one with clear boundaries, it becomes a destination. The Stoics knew healthy relationships aren't built on endless accessibility, but on mutual respect for each other's inner sanctuaries. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. That strength radiates." Picture two friends, one who absorbs every emotional drama around them, the other who listens with empathy but doesn't internalize the chaos. Who do you seek when you need grounded advice? Seneca's letters to Lucilius overflow with this wisdom. When advising his protege on handling toxic relationships, he didn't preach detachment, he taught discernment. Avoid those who would dim your light, he warned, not out of elitism but preservation. Ancient Rome's elite would host lavish banquets, yet Stoics like Cato often left early. Not because they lacked social grace, but because they valued their inner clarity more than empty camaraderie. That selective engagement wasn't rudeness, it was reverence for their own peace. Modern psychology echoes this. Research on emotional boundaries shows that people with strong self-containment, the ability to feel deeply without being hijacked by others' emotions, are perceived as both warm and formidable. They're the colleagues who refuse to participate in office gossip but will listen compassionately to real struggles, the partners who love deeply yet maintain their own hobbies and friendships. Their walls aren't barriers to intimacy, they're the architecture that makes intimacy safe. Building this citadel starts with small, daily practices. The Stoic morning ritual included visualizing challenges they might face, not to worry, but to prepare their emotional gates. Imagine a coworker's harsh critique coming your way. With weak boundaries, it floods your mind for days. With a fortified citadel, you acknowledge the feedback without letting it occupy your inner chambers. Epictetus offered a litmus test. If someone handed you a gift and you refused it, who owns it? Apply that to insults or drama. The moment you stop accepting emotional burdens, they remain with the giver. This extends to digital spaces too. Seneca lived in an era of scrolls and messengers, yet his advice fits social media perfectly. Be wary of letting too many voices into your sacred space. Every notification is a knock at your mental gate. The disciplined mind decides which to answer, which to delay, and which to ignore entirely. Modern leaders like Warren Buffett and Oprah Winfrey attribute their clarity to similar filters, ruthlessly guarding their attention so their inner citadel stays a place of creation, not reaction. The paradox: the stronger your emotional boundaries, the deeper your connections become. Like a well-defended castle that hosts magnificent feasts for trusted guests, your guarded mind can offer richer companionship. People sense when your presence isn't diluted by every passing storm. They're drawn to the stability you embody, not because you're indifferent, but because you've mastered the art of caring without collapsing. Seneca's final word on this rings across centuries. No good thing renders its possessor happy unless his mind is reconciled to the possibility of loss. Your inner citadel isn't just protection, it's the foundation for relationships built on choice, not need. And that's where true attraction begins. There's an almost counterintuitive power in standing before others and saying, "I was wrong." The Stoics didn't just preach accountability, they wore their mistakes like badges of honor, knowing that credibility isn't built on infallibility but on the courage to own imperfections. Cato the Younger, the iron-willed Stoic senator, famously interrupted his own speeches to correct errors in front of the Roman Senate. Imagine that, a man so secure in his principles that he'd pause mid-argument to revise his stance. That's not weakness, it's a masterclass in trust building. When you publicly acknowledge missteps, you don't diminish your authority. You elevate it by proving your commitment to truth over ego. Modern leaders often fear apologies as admissions of failure, but Stoicism flips this script. Consider a CEO who blames market conditions for poor results versus one who says, "Our strategy missed the mark, here's how we're adapting." The first inspires skepticism, the second earns respect. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If anyone can refute me, I'll gladly change, for I seek the truth which never harmed anyone." That humility, rooted not in self-doubt but in relentless pursuit of better, transforms mistakes into magnets for loyalty. Teams don't follow perfection, they follow those who model growth. History's most admired figures embraced this. Lincoln's team of rivals cabinet thrived because he publicly acknowledged his limitations, saying, "I don't like that man, I must get to know him better." Contrast that with leaders who double down on flawed decisions to save face. The Stoic approach: treat errors like scientific data, neutral feedback for refinement. Seneca advised, "Confess your faults openly, you'll blunt the sting of malice." When you disarm critics by agreeing with valid points, you rob gossip of its oxygen and turn detractors into collaborators. Cato's legacy offers the ultimate proof. During a heated debate, he realized he'd misquoted a law. Rather than deflect, he stopped mid-sentence and declared, "If the Senate will permit, I retract my earlier statement." His opponents were stunned into silence. Why? Because integrity that transparent is disarming. Modern research confirms this. Studies on organizational trust show that employees rate leaders who admit faults higher than those who never err. The lesson: perfection is suspect, progress is compelling. Practical application: start small. Next time you misspeak in a meeting, correct it immediately. Actually, let me rephrase that more accurately. When projects falter, lead postmortems with, "Here's where my judgment failed." This isn't self-flagellation, it's strategic authenticity. Epictetus taught, "It's better to trip with the truth than glide with a lie." That stumble doesn't make you fall, it makes you human, and humanity, more than any polished facade, is what truly connects. The deeper magic lies in what happens when you normalize accountability. Colleagues start admitting their own missteps, creating a culture where growth eclipses blame. Families discuss flaws without fear. Friendships deepen because vulnerability becomes reciprocal. Marcus Aurelius saw this ripple effect. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injustice. By owning your errors, you redefine strength, not as never falling, but as rising each time with your integrity intact. And that's a legacy no mask of perfection could ever match. The ancient Stoics didn't just endure hardship, they invited it. Voluntary discomfort wasn't a punishment, it was training. Imagine a blacksmith plunging red-hot steel into water, not to break it but to temper its strength. That's the essence of Stoic hardening practices. Take cold showers, a simple act with profound psychological ramifications. When you choose to stand under freezing water, you're not just building tolerance to physical discomfort, you're rehearsing for life's inevitable shocks. Seneca put it bluntly: set aside a certain number of days to eat only the plainest food, wear your roughest clothing, and ask yourself, is this the condition I so feared? The goal isn't suffering for suffering's sake, it's revealing to yourself that you can withstand more than you think. History's most resilient leaders used this principle long before it had a name. Theodore Roosevelt, sickly as a child, deliberately subjected himself to brutal physical ordeals, boxing, ranching in the Dakotas, skinny dipping in freezing rivers, not to prove his toughness to others, but to prove it to himself. By the time he led the Rough Riders up San Juan Hill, hardship was an old friend. Or consider James Stockdale, the Navy pilot shot down over Vietnam who survived 7 years of torture by applying Epictetus' teachings. His captors broke bones but never his spirit because he'd already conditioned his mind through voluntary adversity. The Stoics knew what modern science now confirms. Discomfort is a dial you can turn up or down, and those who regularly nudge it upward build emotional calluses that protect them when life turns the dial for them. This practice exposes a crucial truth about human psychology. Comfort breeds fragility. The Roman legions didn't train on flat parade grounds, they marched over mountains with full packs. Why? Because battlefield chaos feels less shocking when you've already pushed past voluntary limits. Modern parallels abound. Billionaire investor Ray Dalio swears by daily cold plunges, not for health benefits, but for the mental clarity that comes from mastering discomfort. Special Forces candidates endure hell weeks, not because the military enjoys suffering, but because proving you can handle sleep, deprivation, and hunger reveals who'll keep functioning when missions go sideways. The Stoic version, sleeping on the floor occasionally to remember luxury, isn't entitlement. Wearing thin clothes in winter to appreciate warmth. These aren't acts of self-denial, they're vaccinations against entitlement and victimhood. Voluntary discomfort also reshapes your relationship with fear. Most people spend their lives avoiding unease, which ironically gives it more power. The Stoics flipped this by routinely stepping into controlled adversity. They reduced life's uncontrolled adversities to manageable size. Musonius Rufus made his students build their own classrooms with bare hands, not to save money, but to teach that effort precedes excellence. Modern psychology calls this stress inoculation, like exposing yourself to small doses of a virus to build immunity. When you choose to walk 5 miles instead of driving, or fast for a day, or take the stairs with groceries, you're not just saving gas or calories. You're rehearsing for the day your car breaks down, or food runs short, or elevators fail. The person who's voluntarily gone hungry handles unexpected scarcity with poise. Here's the paradox: intentionally embracing hardship makes you less likely to complain about it. Marcus Aurelius, who slept on a military cot despite being emperor, wrote, "The cucumber is bitter, throw it away. There are brambles in the path, step aside." That's all you need to do, no need to add. Why do these things exist? This mindset, focusing on response over resentment, is cultivated through voluntary discomfort. When you've willingly stood barefoot in snow, a cancelled flight becomes an inconvenience, not a crisis. When you've fasted for 24 hours, a delayed meal doesn't trigger irritability. The modern world obsesses over eliminating discomfort. The Stoics mastered the art of rendering it irrelevant. Practical application: start infinitesimally. Next shower, turn the knob cold for the final 10 seconds. Walk somewhere you'd normally drive. Skip a meal and observe the emotions that arise. The goal isn't to punish yourself, it's to rediscover agency. As Epictetus taught, difficulty shows what men are. When you routinely test your edges, you stop fearing life's sharp corners. And that's when people notice a peculiar shift. Where others see obstacles, you see opportunities. Not because you're tougher than them, but because you've practiced hearing the whisper of your own resilience. Every person you meet, whether friend, foe, or stranger, holds a lesson if you're willing to learn. The Stoics called this the cosmic perspective, viewing all encounters as if life itself had arranged them for your growth. Epictetus, the former slave who became one of history's greatest teachers, put it bluntly: if someone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, don't make excuses. Reply, he must not know my other faults, or he would have mentioned those too. That twist, turning criticism into a curriculum, reveals the Stoic secret to lifelong learning. When you stop seeing people as obstacles or admirers and start seeing them as mirrors reflecting unseen parts of yourself, every interaction becomes a masterclass. Take Marcus Aurelius confronting his most irritating senators. Instead of resenting their opposition, he wrote in his journal, "When they assail you with their opinions, ask yourself, what fact am I ignoring that they see?" That shift from resistance to curiosity didn't just make him a wiser ruler, it transformed adversaries into unwitting mentors. Modern parallels are everywhere. The co-worker who nitpicks your proposals, they're sharpening your attention to detail. The relative who dismisses your dreams, they're testing your conviction. Even the stranger who cuts you off in traffic, what if they're teaching you patience? The Stoics didn't wait for gurus. They mined wisdom from quarry others would have discarded. Epictetus took this further with his three-filter approach to criticism. Before reacting, he'd ask, is this true? If yes, learn. Is it false? Then why distress over fiction? Is it partially true? Extract the gold, discard the dross. Imagine applying this to a harsh performance review or a friend's tough love. Suddenly, pride doesn't cloud growth. Benjamin Franklin, a devoted Stoic student, kept a moral ledger where he recorded critics' valid points to improve upon. His humility, treating detractors as unpaid coaches, turned enemies into enablers of his success. This mindset also dissolves social hierarchies when seeking knowledge. The Stoics would learn from slaves, children, even animals. Seneca wrote, "Nature gives us sparks of reason, we fan them by observing all creatures." A dog's loyalty teaches fidelity, a child's wonder rekindles curiosity, an ant's diligence models persistence. Modern examples: Steve Jobs studied calligraphy, a useless class then revolutionized typography in personal computing. A chef learns plating from a painter, a CEO studies teamwork from geese flying in formation. When you view the world as your classroom, teachers appear everywhere. Practical application: start with reverse mentoring. Seek insights from those younger, less experienced, or outside your field. A Gen Z intern can teach a seasoned executive about digital trends. A janitor might reveal workplace inefficiencies invisible to management. The Stoics called this prosouch attention so deep it finds lessons in loafers and kings alike. Next time someone annoys you, play Marcus' game. What skill is this moment demanding? Patience, boundaries, better communication. Even toxic people train you in discernment. The ultimate test comes with outright hostility. When Cato was punched in the face during a political debate, he didn't retaliate or hold a grudge. He finished his speech, then returned to the assailant the next day as if nothing happened. His indifference to pettiness didn't reward the act, it revealed its insignificance. Epictetus explained why. When a dog barks at you, do you bark back? Then why do you react when men make noise? By refusing to descend to their level, you expose the poverty of their behavior while enriching your own character. Here's the magical byproduct of this perspective. It makes you more approachable. People sense when you're not judging but genuinely curious. The barista shares coffee secrets. The shy coworker offers breakthrough ideas. Why? Because unlike most, you're not scanning for flaws. You're foraging for wisdom. Seneca observed, "The wise man lacks nothing, yet he still desires to learn." That hunger to see even fools as philosophers in disguise is what turns ordinary days into endless discoveries. And that's a presence no degree or title can replicate. Success isn't a leaderboard, it's an inner compass. The Stoics measured progress by a radical standard, not how you stacked against others, but whether you lived in alignment with your own principles. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who turned down imperial favor to live simply, put it bluntly, "What good is fame when you've betrayed yourself to earn it?" That question cuts to the heart of internal success metrics. Imagine two runners, one races to outpace competitors, the other to beat their personal best. The first is enslaved to others' speeds, the second is free to focus on growth. That's the Stoic shift from social comparison to self-confrontation. Modern culture treats success like a collective hallucination, chasing promotions, likes, and titles because everyone else does. The Stoics called this kenodoxia, the empty glory of external validation. Marcus Aurelius, ruler of Rome, scribbled reminders like, "It's ridiculous not to flee from your own wickedness, yet tire yourself trying to flee another's." That inversion, prioritizing inner integrity over outward appearances, isn't just philosophical, it's practical psychology. Studies on comparison show that people who define success intrinsically report higher fulfillment than those tethered to social benchmarks. Think of the artist who creates for the joy of expression versus one obsessed with gallery sales. The first can't be derailed by rejection, the second lives on a roller coaster of others' opinions. Musonius took this further by rejecting fame entirely. When Emperor Nero offered him wealth and prestige, he chose exile instead, teaching philosophy from a dirt floor. His students expected bitterness but found him more at peace than ever. Why? Because his metric wasn't applause, it was consistency. He'd ask, "Did I act with justice today? Did I choose courage over comfort?" That daily audit, stripped of external noise, cultivated something rare: self-possession. Modern parallels abound: the entrepreneur who measures success by customer impact rather than valuation, or the parent who prioritizes presence over Pinterest perfect birthdays. Their confidence doesn't fluctuate with trends because their compass points inward. Here's the magnetic effect of internal metrics: they repel neediness. The person who knows their worth isn't rattled by slights or starved for praise. Epictetus, who endured slavery and disability, laughed at insults. If someone told you your body smelled bad, you wouldn't rage, you'd wash. Why rage when they say your mind stinks? That lightness comes from a core truth. His self-assessment didn't require others' approval. Contrast this with the social media influencer tweaking content to please algorithms. Every like becomes a hit of dopamine, every dip in engagement a crisis. The Stoic alternative: create because creation aligns with your purpose, share because sharing serves others. The rest is whether predictable, uncontrollable, and irrelevant to your foundation. Practical application: try the Stoic evening review with 2 questions. Where did I act according to my values today? Where did I compromise for external rewards? No grades, no rankings, just honest reflection. Over time, this practice rewires your focus. A musician stops obsessing over streams and rediscovers the joy of practice. A leader stops chasing PR and starts making principled decisions. Marcus Aurelius modeled this nightly. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. That shift from debating ideals to embodying them is where real transformation begins. The ultimate test comes when external rewards dangle just out of reach. Promotions go to less qualified colleagues. Rivals take credit for your ideas. The Stoic response: retreat into your inner citadel. Marcus wrote, not in defeat but in remembrance. Your worth was never in the trophy but in the effort that earned it. Like a tree measured by its roots rather than its height, internal success anchors you so deeply that no storm can topple your peace. And ironically, that's when the world starts noticing, not because you're begging for attention, but because you're too focused on your work to notice who's watching. The Stoics saw the universe as a living, breathing organism, each person not an isolated fragment, but a vital thread in the same vast tapestry. They called this sympatheia, the profound interconnectedness of all things. Marcus Aurelius captured it perfectly when he wrote, "What brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee." This wasn't poetic metaphor to him, it was physics. Just as a single tremor reverberates through an entire spider's web, every choice we make sends ripples through the human network. And here's the magnetic effect. When you genuinely operate from this awareness, people sense it. Not because you announce it, but because your actions whisper it in ways that bypass skepticism and touch something primal in them. Consider how Marcus governed with this lens. He referred to citizens not as subjects, but as fellow beings sharing the same divine spark. That shift from ruler over others to partner with them transformed his leadership. History records how he'd walk the streets listening to grievances without guards, not as publicity stunts, but because he saw himself as part of the collective body. The modern equivalent, the CEO who eats in the company cafeteria daily, not for photos, but to stay woven into the fabric of their team's reality. Or the influencer who responds to critical comments with curiosity rather than defensiveness, recognizing the shared humanity beneath the disagreement. This principle dismantles us versus them thinking at its root. Epictetus, born a slave, taught that even our enemies are misguided kin, a people acting from broken logic rather than evil essence. When someone cuts you off in traffic or berates you at work, the instinct is to demonize, but sympatheia asks what pain or ignorance might be driving them. How am I, in different circumstances, capable of the same? That perspective doesn't excuse harm, but it prevents you from absorbing toxicity. Picture two shoppers during a Black Friday sale. One shoves past others to grab the last TV, while another helps a fallen stranger up despite losing their spot. The second isn't just kinder, they're operating from a deeper truth about belonging. The science behind this is startling. Studies on mirror neurons reveal that our brains literally sync with those we engage with. When we witness someone's joy or pain, our neural patterns mimic theirs. The Stoics anticipated this, teaching that emotion is contagious because we're neurologically wired for resonance. Marcus wrote, "The injury you do to another, you're doing first to yourself." Modern conflicts prove this daily. The boss who belittles employees breeds a culture that eventually undermines their own authority. The friend who gossips sows distrust that circles back. Sympatheia isn't New Age idealism, it's social physics, practical application. Start with the Stoic morning ritual. Upon waking, whisper, "Today, I meet parts of myself disguised as others." Before reacting to irritation, ask, when have I acted similarly? During disagreements, seek the shared need beneath opposing positions, the desire for respect, security, or dignity. This isn't about becoming a doormat, but about recognizing that tearing others down never elevates you. It weakens the entire web you're suspended in. The ultimate test comes when facing true malevolence. Here, sympatheia becomes revolutionary. Rather than hate corrupt leaders or abusive figures, the Stoics pitied them. As Seneca observed, no one is more enslaved than the tyrant. They understood that harming others first requires harming one's own humanity, that the cruelest people are often the most spiritually impoverished. This doesn't mean passive acceptance, but it changes how you resist. Mandela studied his jailer's language to negotiate better conditions not out of submission, but from the insight that even oppressors respond when addressed as fellow humans. There's an old Zen saying, "How you do anything is how you do everything." The Stoics would add, "How you treat anyone is how you treat everyone, including yourself." When you extend patience to a struggling coworker, you water seeds of patience within your own psyche. When you dismiss someone's pain, you atrophy your own capacity for compassion. That's the secret alchemy of sympatheia. The kindness you deposit into the collective account is the currency you'll withdraw when your own winter comes. And in that reciprocity, you become someone others don't just respect but feel inexplicably drawn to. Not because you're perfect, but because you remind them wordlessly of what they too could be. Emotions are like lightning, fast, powerful, and capable of scorching everything in their path if left unchecked. The Stoics didn't just preach emotional control. They engineered a fail-safe mechanism called the Stoic pause, a deliberate gap between stimulus and response where wisdom whispers before regret shouts. Epictetus, the philosopher who turned his enslavement into a masterclass on inner freedom, put it bluntly, It's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters. That split-second pause isn't passivity. It's the difference between a reaction that fractures relationships and one that fortifies them. Picture a heated boardroom debate. One executive interrupts with a sarcastic jab, derailing the discussion. Another takes a visible breath, then responds with measured clarity. Who commands the room? Neuroscience reveals why this works. The amygdala, your brain's alarm system, triggers fight or flight in milliseconds, but the prefrontal cortex, responsible for reasoning, needs at least 6 seconds to engage. The Stoic pause bridges that gap. Marcus Aurelius journaled about this nightly, reviewing where he'd let reactions override principles. Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary? That simple question, inserted like a speed bump before speech, can transform interactions from destructive to constructive. Anger management studies validate this ancient technique. Researchers at the University of Illinois found that pausing just long enough to label an emotion, "I'm feeling furious," reduces amygdala activity by over 30%. The Stoics weaponized this instinctively. Seneca, who wrote extensively on temper, advised, count to 10 when angry, to 100 when very angry. But his deeper insight was tactical. Delaying reaction doesn't suppress emotion, it redirects its energy. Like a judo master using an opponent's momentum, the pause lets you channel irritation into inquiry, rage into resolve. Modern case studies bring this to life. Consider a Chicago hospital that trained staff in Stoic pauses during patient conflicts. Nurses who practiced counting breaths before responding saw a 40% drop in escalation incidents. Or the Silicon Valley CEO who instituted a 24-hour rule for emotional emails. No replies composed in frustration sent before a day's reflection. His team reported feeling heard rather than attacked, even during disagreements. These aren't just conflict hacks, they're resets for entire communication ecosystems. The pause also unveils hidden power dynamics. Epictetus taught his students to ask, who benefits from my reaction? When a provocateur baits you, your instant fury is their victory. But delay that response by mere seconds, and their leverage evaporates. History's most composed leaders exploited this. Gandhi would let colonial insults hang in silence before responding with unnerving calm, turning mockery into moral spotlight. The pause, wielded skillfully, doesn't just prevent missteps, it becomes psychological jiu-jitsu. Here's how to cultivate it. Start with physical anchors. The Stoics used tactile reminders, a ring turned inward when emotions surged, a deep breath through the nose. Modern equivalents might be pressing your tongue to the roof of your mouth before speaking or visualizing a gate between impulse and action. These cues create neural pathways that, over time, make the pause reflexive. Psychologists call this response inhibition, a muscle strengthened through repetition. The greatest reward of this practice, it transforms not just how others perceive you, but how you perceive yourself. Every time you choose response over reaction, you reinforce your identity as someone governed by principles, not impulses. Seneca noted, "We are more often frightened than hurt. Our imagination is the real torment." The pause shrinks those imagined monsters to their true size. And in that space between provocation and action, you'll find something unexpected. Not just better outcomes, but a quieter, more commanding version of yourself. Deep work isn't just productivity, it's a modern rebellion. The Stoics didn't have smartphones, but they understood attention as sacred currency. Seneca wrote letters by candlelight, fully immersed for hours, warning that scattered attention is wasted life. Fast forward to today, the average knowledge worker switches tasks every 3 minutes, drowning in notifications while mistaking busyness for progress. But here's the paradox: the deeper you focus, the more opportunities find you. Not because you're chasing them, but because mastery creates gravity. Picture 2 craftsmen. One spends his days jumping between social media and shallow tasks. The other carves a single wooden sculpture with undivided attention. Months later, whose work commands higher value, whose reputation grows, flow states, those rare moments when time dissolves and skill merges with challenge, are the neurological signature of Stoic focus. Marcus Aurelius described it as the soul's natural condition, where external noise fades and inner clarity takes over. Modern neuroscience confirms this. During deep work, the brain's prefrontal cortex temporarily dials down its hypervigilance, while dopamine and norepinephrine sharpen concentration. The result, a state where creative breakthroughs feel effortless. Think of Da Vinci painting the Mona Lisa's layers over 4 years, or Marie Curie isolating radium through relentless experimentation. Their genius wasn't innate talent alone, it was the compounding effect of hours spent in undistracted immersion. Contrast this with the fractured attention of modern work culture. Open offices, Slack pings, and urgent emails fracture focus into fragments. Cal Newport, who coined the term deep work, calculates that it takes 23 minutes to fully regain focus after an interruption. The Stoics would have recognized this as spiritual theft, each distraction stealing not just time but the very quality of thought. Epictetus warned, if you seek truth, you must be able to bear solitude. Not isolation, but the kind of solitude where ideas mature without interruption. Today's equivalent, the writer who disables Wi-Fi to draft chapters, or the programmer who wears noise-canceling headphones to enter the zone. Their output isn't just better, it's qualitatively different, radiating a depth that algorithms can't replicate. Mastery's attraction effect is undeniable. History's most sought-after minds, from ancient philosophers to modern innovators, share one trait. They became undeniable by virtue of their focus. Michelangelo didn't market his way into the Sistine Chapel. His ability to paint upside down for years spoke louder than any pitch. Similarly, when you consistently produce work that bears the marks of deep focus, whether it's a flawless legal brief, a handcrafted table, or a perfectly tuned engine, people notice. Not because you've networked aggressively, but because excellence announces itself. The Stoics called this radiate, excellence as its own form of persuasion. Practical application start with time blocking. The Stoics divided days into purposeful segments: morning reflection, focused labor, evening review. Modern adapters like Elon Musk schedule their calendars in 5-minute increments. The key isn't rigidity, it's intentionality. Try 90-minute focus sprints with a physical timer, treating that span as inviolable. Over time, these blocks train your brain to sink into depth like a muscle memory. Another tactic, create distraction rituals. Just as Seneca prepared for writing by smoothing his parchment and sharpening his quill, develop pre-focus routines: brewing tea, lighting a candle, arranging tools that signal to your brain it's time to go deep. The deepest reward of this practice, it cultivates a presence that transcends work. When you train your mind to focus wholly on a woodworking project or coding problem, you inadvertently strengthen its ability to be fully with a loved one or savor a meal. Musonius Rufus taught that attention is the rarest form of generosity. In an age of perpetual half-presence, the person who listens without glancing at their phone, who engages without mental multitasking, becomes a rare beacon. Their conversations feel richer, their collaborations more fruitful, because they bring the same quality of attention to people that they do to their craft. Epictetus offered the ultimate litmus test. If you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless in extraneous matters. The social media addict can discuss every viral trend. The deep worker might seem out of touch until their contributions reshape industries. Depth isn't just a productivity hack, it's the silent engine behind every work that endures. And in a world racing toward the shallow end, those who dive deep don't just stand out, they redefine what's possible. Envy has a secret: it's not your enemy, but a distorted mirror revealing unmet potential. The Stoics didn't deny the sting of jealousy, they refined it into a tool sharper than any flattery. Seneca, who advised emperors and outlived Nero's scheming, wrote a letter that cuts to the bone. That which makes you admire another can belong to you too, if you're willing to pay its price. Notice the pivot. He doesn't shame the emotion, he redirects its energy. When you catch yourself coveting a colleague's promotion or a friend's charisma, that pang isn't a verdict on your lack, it's a map to your next frontier. History's greatest comebacks often began with envy alchemized into action. Young Theodore Roosevelt, frail and asthmatic, watched rugged cowboys with aching admiration. Instead of resenting their vitality, he built his own through brutal self-conditioning, boxing, ranching, surviving blizzards. Decades later, his relentless stamina would fuel a presidency. The Stoic twist: he didn't just mimic his idols, he surpassed them by channeling envy into a personalized blueprint. Marcus Aurelius journaled about this mental reframe. When you're tempted to resent someone's talent, ask, what's stopping me from cultivating it? That question doesn't just neutralize jealousy, it weaponizes it. Modern psychology confirms this ancient hack. Studies on benign envy show that when we view others' success as attainable, it triggers a surge of motivation rather than despair. The key lies in perception, seeing the gap between you and your rival not as a fixed sentence, but as a stretch of road you're capable of traveling. Think of two junior analysts eyeing the same promotion. One seethes at the favored candidate's rapport with executives. The other studies their communication patterns, then joins a public speaking club. Both feel the same initial envy, only the second lets it carve a path forward. Here's where Stoicism outshines cheap positivity. Seneca didn't advise ignoring envy or pretending it away. He told his students to dissect it like an autopsy. What exact trait burns me? How did they acquire it? What's the equivalent cost for me? Aerial silk performers don't just envy their instructors' flips, they log hours of falls and bruises. Writers aching for a rival's prose don't sulk, they dissect sentences and write daily. This surgical approach transforms envy from a poison to a progress tracker. The most transformative application: reverse engineering your idols. When musician Nick Cave lost his son, he envied other fathers their intact families until he recognized their hidden struggles too. His journal reflects pure Stoicism. Comparison is the thief of joy, but only if you compare selectively. The Stoics practiced sympatheia, seeing the full picture of those we envy. That CEO with the corner office, she missed her daughter's recitals. The influencer with perfect photos, he battles anxiety off camera. This wider lens doesn't diminish their achievements, it humanizes them into attainable milestones rather than magical feats. Practical steps: start an envy log. Whenever jealousy strikes, record what triggered it, what specific quality do I admire, how can I ethically cultivate my version. Over time, patterns emerge. You'll notice if you're drawn to creativity, discipline, or social ease. Then design targeted practices. Loved a rival's eloquent speech. Join Toastmasters. Coveted a friend's serenity. Try Stoic morning meditations. The goal isn't to become them, but to borrow their light to ignite your own. Seneca's final word on this rings across centuries. The man who asks why does he have more should ask why don't I have the courage to earn more. That shift from outward resentment to inward challenge is where envy stops being a wound and starts being a compass. And when you walk into rooms having turned rivals into mentors and jealousy into jet fuel, people don't just respect you, they wonder at the quiet fire behind your eyes. There's a quiet rebellion happening, one that doesn't riot in the streets, but unfolds in the choices we make every day between what's fleeting and what's eternal. The Stoics measured their lives not in applause but in echoes, the kind that linger long after the crowd has moved on. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled the most powerful empire on earth, scribbled this reminder in his private journal: what we do now echoes in eternity. That wasn't poetic hyperbole to him, it was physics. Every action sends ripples through time, and the question isn't whether you'll leave a mark, but what kind. Consider two monuments. One is a viral tweet blazing across screens for a day before vanishing into the digital abyss. The other is a Roman aqueduct, still standing 2,000 years later because it was built to quench actual thirst, not feed egos. That's the Stoic distinction between legacy and likes. Social media tricks us into mistaking visibility for value, as if a million strangers clicking heart could somehow fill the void where purpose belongs. But scroll through any platform and you'll notice something eerie. Yesterday's trending topics are today's forgotten trivia. The posts that age well aren't the ones chasing algorithms. They're the ones that solved real problems or sparked genuine connection. Marcus saw this clearly. At the height of his power, he wrote, "Alexander the Great and his mule driver both died the same end for both. No amount of conquest spared Alexander from oblivion's leveling effect." But here's the twist. Marcus didn't write that to depress himself. He wrote it to liberate himself, to focus on work that would outlast his mortality. The laws he passed reformed Roman courts for generations. His meditations, never intended for publication, became a manual for resilience across centuries. That's the paradox the Stoics uncovered. The less you obsess over being remembered, the more unforgettable you become. Modern psychology confirms this ancient insight. Studies on generativity, the desire to nurture future generations, show it's the single strongest predictor of life satisfaction in later years. The volunteers teaching kids to read, the engineers designing greener infrastructure, the parents raising emotionally intelligent children, they're all practicing a form of Stoic legacy building. Their reward isn't trending on Twitter, it's knowing their efforts will compound long after they're gone. Like planting oak trees whose shade they'll never sit under, they invest in a future they can only imagine. Look closer at history's most enduring figures. Beethoven composed his Ninth Symphony while completely deaf. Not for fame, he couldn't hear applause, but because the music demanded to exist. Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring knowing it would enrage chemical giants, but the alternative, a poisoned planet, was unthinkable. Their motivations shared a Stoic core: creation over consumption, impact over impressions. Even in failure, this mindset leaves a trail others can follow. The scientists whose failed experiments established what doesn't work, the entrepreneurs whose bankruptcies taught successors how to pivot. Their so-called losses became ladders for others to climb. Here's where social media's feedback loop distorts our compass. Platforms are designed to make us confuse attention with achievement. An influencer's perfectly framed lunch gets more engagement than a researcher's decade-long cancer study. But the Stoics would ask which meal actually nourished someone. Marcus warned, fame's a rotten applause, the clapping of hands that will soon be dust. That's not cynicism, it's clarity. When you internalize that even pyramids erode, you stop building for spectators and start building for substance. Practical applications: start a legacy ledger, not some grandiose document, just a weekly note. What did I do today that might outlive me? Maybe it's mentoring a junior colleague, planting a perennial garden, or simply modeling patience for your kids. The scale doesn't matter, the orientation does. Epictetus said, "If you wish to be remembered, live in ways worthy of memory." Notice he didn't say, "perform memorably." The teacher whose students still quote her decades later, the neighbor who started a community garden, their influence spreads quietly, without fanfare, because real legacy isn't announced, it's accumulated. The final test comes at life's crossroads. When choosing between a flashy career move and a grounded one, ask Marcus' question: will this matter in 100 years? Not as a guilt trip, but as a tuning fork, helping you discern between vibrations that fade and frequencies that endure. Because in the end, the people who shape history aren't always the ones making headlines. They're the ones too busy shaping tomorrow to notice who's watching today. There you have it, 25 Stoic actions that don't just attract admiration but forge an unshakable presence. From practicing authenticity to mastering emotional boundaries, from alchemizing envy into fuel to leaving echoes rather than noise, each principle isn't a trick but a transformation. This isn't about manipulating perceptions, it's about embodying a way of being so grounded that magnetism becomes inevitable. Think of these actions as a blueprint, not for chasing attention, but for becoming someone attention can't ignore. The beauty of Stoicism lies in its immediacy. You don't need a title, wealth, or anyone's permission to start. Right now, you can choose one action, just one, to integrate today. Maybe it's the Stoic pause before reacting to a provocation, or the evening audit where you reflect on where you lived your values and where you strayed. It could be as simple as waking up tomorrow and asking, like Marcus Aurelius, what am I borrowing from life today? And feeling that visceral gratitude for the chance to try again. Small steps compound. A single cold shower today might seem insignificant, but over time, that discipline spills into how you handle setbacks, how you lead, how you love. Here's the challenge. Don't let this just be another video you watch and forget. Wisdom only works when applied, so ask yourself, which Stoic action will you embody today? Will it be the quiet confidence of authenticity, the strategic power of silence, or the relentless focus on what you can control? Pick one, practice it. Watch how it shifts not just how others see you, but how you see yourself. And if this resonated with you, if you're ready to dive deeper into the art of living with purpose, hit that subscribe button. More timeless wisdom is coming, and you won't want to miss it. Until then, remember, the world doesn't need more performance. It needs more people who have done the inner work so thoroughly that their presence becomes a gift. Now go make today your masterpiece.